Welcome back to episode 7, I think. Yeah, I think this is episode 7. At the time I'm recording this, it's snowing, snowmageddon outside. Today, we're going to start with a tweet, some tweets. And then after that, we're going to jump into a book that I'm reading. And I want to share that with you. Really? Does that make my voice sound like I'm talking into the mic, like I'm from a radio show? Why am I putting on this accent? The tweet is by James Clear. The cost of moving slowly is learning slowly. I think you could apply that to literally everything. I also take this thought and apply it to day to day is that if you put off something, for example, let's say if you put off working out, every day you put off working out or eating healthy, you're putting off that body or that fitness level that you want. So if let's say if you want to learn how to sketch, you're not sketching every day, you're never going to get to that level. I would actually slightly tweak it. It's, if you think about that story from the rabbit and the turtle, what's that story called? The turtle and the rabbit. The tortoise and the hare. Hare. It's a brilliant story because in that story, the rabbit runs up ahead. The takeaway from that story is that if you go steady at a consistent speed, you're going to win, or at least put yourself in a position to win. Okay, next tweet. Oh, I stand corrected. The story is actually just called The Rabbit and the Turtle. So speed, according to me, is showing up daily and being systems oriented. This is the advantage of being surgical with who you follow on Twitter, because every time I open up Twitter, this is the kind of cool stuff that I get to see. Peace of mind is a consequence of being honest with yourself under any circumstance. I would even take that further and say that don't let the external environment dictate how you feel. I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but that's what I try to strive for, is not let people around me or the weather affect my plans. So even if it's a snow blizzard and I plan to go for a long walk or a run, I just go do it. I was actually taught this by my physical trainer back in India, who would say, Paul, when you come into the gym, just do your best for the day. And you could look at it from the lens that, even if you're not feeling your 100%, you still gave it whatever you had that day. You're basically not letting your own inertia get in the way of you doing stuff. We'll read one more tweet and then we're going to jump into the book. Ooh, okay. A follow-up to what we were talking about before. A happy person. This is by Dr. Smith 24. A happy person isn't someone who's happy all the time. It's someone who effortlessly interprets events in such a way that they don't lose their innate peace. Novel. Exactly. Is that don't let the external environment dictate how you feel on the inside. A good example of that is that, imagine all day you get praise for something that you created, but then you get that one negative feedback. Now, are you going to obsess over that one negative feedback? I mean, of course, as a human, you are drawn to negative feedback, but don't get carried away with positive feedback or carried away with negative feedback. So you want to kind of stay in that center point. I know, like in my car, there's like this gravity G-force meter in my car. And I look at that G-force meter and I say that is your emotional state. Every time you go towards positive or negative, you're altering your inner G-force. As you accelerate in the car or you brake hard, it shows you where the G-force of the car is going. Similarly, your emotional state, depending on the kind of feedback and how the world is reacting to you and you are reacting to the world, and based on your environment, you can see how your inner G-force is relating to your environment. So the closer you are to that center point on that X-axis, the better. Of course, I'm trying to achieve this myself every day. Final tweet for today by Paul Graham. If someone's much better than you at something, they probably try much harder. You probably underestimate how much harder they try. Yep, I totally agree. Is that when we see people online, typically see their best version, but we also forget how they got to that position and how much effort and time they invested in getting good or amazing or awesome or whatever at that. We only see the the final product. We don't see the day-to-day. Here's the book that we're going to be talking about. It's called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I was thinking it would be fun that I read the book, but share the best parts of the book with you. And if you like the ideas, then you should probably purchase this book for yourself. Being creative is not just about sketching and drawing. Because typically when you ask people, are you creative? And their gut reaction is, oh, I can't draw. But that's not the case at all. Anyways, I actually purchased 2 books from Austin Kleon. One is Show Your Work and one is Steal Like an Artist, but they're sequential. Even though I read Show Your Work first, I'm reading Steal Like an Artist now. It's a really fun, light book. And if you're stuck in like a rut and your inertia is in the way, I think it just has like helpful, positive, stoic, almost words of wisdom packed into this really beautiful illustrated book. Let's go through it. So we'll start with Steal Like an Artist. That's because that's the first one in the sequence. If you haven't seen the previous episode, I'm actually giving out a copy of this book. So go watch that video and just apply. In this video, I'm going to be giving out a copy of this book. So if you want this book, stay till the end. I'm not going to read word to word. I'm going to read a little bit. Whatever I find interesting, I'm going to share that with you. Okay, right out of the gate, the 2 quotes that open up this book and set the expectation of what this book is all about literally goes to what the title is, which is Steal Like an Artist. The quote by Pablo Picasso is, "Art is theft." So Austin Kleon opens up the book by saying that, anytime you're giving advice, you're actually talking to yourself in the past. And this book is an expression of that. Typically, artists get asked this a lot, which is, where do you get your ideas from? And this is something that I think about as well, which is that usually when I'm bored, sitting back in my sofa, going for a run, pooping, doing something that has nothing to do with my work is when I get all these ideas. And he bluntly puts it that, when you ask an artist, how do you get your ideas? The correct response is, I steal them. There's ideas that you steal and there are ideas that you don't steal. Build a repository of ideas that you can pull from. Think of it like your own mental Pinterest board. Think of it, my God, gas. Think of it as your own mental Pinterest board that you've amalgamated a whole bunch of ideas that you can pull from when required. And then this idea of like nothing is original, like all artists steal. Everybody is trying to emulate and copy somebody else. The distinction is that if you outright copy somebody, that's plagiarism. But if you copy 100 people, that's when you are unique. Here's the beautiful quote by André Gide, or Gide. It's G-I-D-E, or André Gide. I don't know the correct pronunciation. Everything that needs to be said has already been said. But because they were not around to listen to it, you need to say it again. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there to hear it, did the tree actually fall? The genealogy of ideas, beautiful example here is that if you draw 2 parallel lines, how many lines are there? Yeah, take a minute. Draw a mental image of 2 lines drawn parallel, horizontally or vertically. And how many lines do you see? Well, there are 3 lines. There's the first line that you drew, the second line that you drew, and then the negative space in the middle. That's 3 lines. Mind blown. So 1 plus 1, your mom and dad, 1 plus 1 equaled you, or which is 1 plus 1 is equal to 3. And we are basically a sum of the best ideas from our parents. Also not the best ideas. Garbage in, garbage out. My version of this is get hyper selective and surgical with what you consume mentally and physically. So what you eat and what you consume. Stop following stupid people on Twitter. Stop wasting your time following the Bitcoin trend, all that stuff, whatever. Pick your own poison. Another great idea in this book is that, climb your own family tree. Basically, everybody steals. And if you look at the people that you're inspired by, you want to look at their work and you want to dig deeper. Instead of just copying them, try to mimic their thinking, get into their mindset of how did they approach these ideas? How did they approach this thing? Try to get into that mindset and then look at who were their inspiration. So you want to kind of start building that family tree. So you're inspired by a person X and you want to look at who were they inspired by? and then who were they inspired by? And you want to start building that family tree. And that way you can start building your own branches. Beautiful. Seeing yourself as part of a creative lineage will help you feel less alone as you start making your own stuff. Another great concept in this book is that save your thefts for later, is to have a swipe file, which is anything interesting that you find, keep adding to it. So it doesn't just have to be a mental Pinterest board, but you have physical copies, notes, sketches, post-its, torn pieces of magazine, all littered in your studio or in a book, whatever format works best for you. Compile that shit. Another beautiful quote in the book is, "It is better to take what does not belong to you than to let it lie around neglected." I have read this book once already. Sometimes, even though this is like a very light read, there's some deep shit in here. Especially depending on where you are in your own journey, some of this stuff is going to hit you like it's going to hit you. Moving to chapter 2, which is, you shouldn't wait around to know who you are to get started. And the idea being that just get started, and by being on that path, you'll figure out who you are. So don't wait for this epiphany and just get started. If you envision yourself as writing a book, start by just writing the first chapter or the first sentence or the first paragraph. And then the idea of start copying. When we're born, we don't have a POV. What we do is we learn from others how to walk, how to talk, language. We basically copy the world, we absorb. And even when we're trying to come up with our own perspective, what you want to do is learn from many people, and instead of copying their output, copy their thinking. Get into their skin, get into their mindset of how did they actually arrive at the solution. And that way you're tuning your brain to think differently, which is start copying what you love. Copy, copy, copy. At the end of the copy, you will find yourself. Copying is about reverse engineering. It's like a mechanic taking apart a car to see how it works. Even the Beatles started as a cover band. Paul McCartney has said, "I emulated Buddy Holly, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis. We all did." McCartney and his partner John Lennon became one of the greatest songwriting teams in history. But as McCartney recalls, they only started writing their own songs as a way to avoid other bands being able to play our set. So when you're feeling imposter syndrome or you feel like you don't have your own perspective, just start copying. There's nothing wrong with copying. And you can be rest assured that the people that you look up to also started somewhere, and that most likely was copying someone. So the cartoonist Gary Panter goes, "If you have one person you're influenced by, everyone will say you're the next whoever. But if you rip off 100 people, everyone will say you're so original." Exactly. Austin really hits it home when he goes on to say, "Imitation is about copying. Emulation is when imitation goes one step further, breaking through into your own thing." Chapter 3 goes on to say, "Write the book you want to read." So he goes on to talk about, how he watched Jurassic Park 1 and he came back home so excited and he really wanted to know what the sequel might be like. So he just sat down on his own computer and wrote down a sequel. I think this is a great way to come up with ideas, is that to see something that already exists and you put your own spin on it. So let's say, if there's a song and you're like, well, what if we were to sing this song in a different language with different beats? That's like a really silly example. Just got a text message. Chapter 4 is probably one of my favorites. Use your physicality when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to be creative, especially, is that if you observe musicians, they fully get immersed into the song, into the words, into the lyrics. As they're singing and they're playing the guitar, they're using their whole body. Especially if you look at a painter who's doing like a large canvas, you'll see them use their whole body and get fully immersed into it. And he compares it to the fact that, when you look at somebody who is on a computer, that person looks so still. You almost look like you're lifeless. A way to break that pattern and that habit is to set up 2 different workspaces. One is a physical workspace where you have tools, you have post-it notes, sketchbooks, Sharpies. and so on, where you scribble and write ideas. And then you have your digital desk, which has your laptop, your iPad. So you want to have basically two desks. One is an analog desk and one is a digital desk. On the analog desk, you have all the physical tools, Sharpies, Post-it notes. If you're a craftsperson, it could be scissors, glue, and so on. And when you're in the idea stage, you want to start off in the analog side of things. Immerse yourself in your Post-it notes, in your ideas, in your sketches, in your scrapbooks, and you're kind of immersed in that environment. And then once you kind of have a good idea, then go to a digital space, because he also talks about this idea that when you're on your laptop or when you're in your digital space, you're ideating, but editing at the same time. Whereas when you want to be ideating, you want to be not filtering at all. You want to just let it flow out of you. So I really like that concept. I think that is a beautiful framework for any creative person, is to have two spaces. Tom Gauld says he stays away from the computer until he's done most of the thinking for his strips, because once the computer is involved, things are on an inevitable path to being finished. Whereas in my sketchbook, the possibilities are endless. Create two different physical spaces. One where there's no restrictions to your thinking, your creativity, you're just spitballing. Once you shape your idea, then you move to your digital workspace where you go and execute that idea. And then Austin goes on to say that, you have this, you go from your analog desk to your digital space and continuously iterate on your ideas. I just love this specific chapter and framework, by the way. Work on multiple projects, hop between those projects. So if you get bored of something, jump to another one. And then if you get bored of that, jump to another one. Keep yourself in a cycle where you're jumping from one idea to the other. And there's nothing wrong in that. So when you're procrastinating over something, you can go spend that time doing something else. You can go spend time working on a different idea. Allow yourself to get bored. In boredom is where your mind naturally is in this seeking. In boredom is where the ideas come from. Just stare into the abyss. Stare at the fan. I think it's satisfying, because looking at the fan, there's a beautiful Steve Jobs quote. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. The fact that you executed all those ideas is what unifies them. And that's how they connect. The next chapter goes, do good work and share it with people. When you're starting out, people are not paying attention. So take full advantage of that. Experiment, try different things. There's no external pressure from managers, your audience to do certain things a certain way. But take advantage of the fact that nobody cares. There's also this idea that you don't have to share everything. You can share small pieces of what you're working on, which is, instead of waiting for the product to be finished, share parts of the things that you're doing, which bring people into how you made that thing. Next idea talks about living away from home, move to a different city, expose yourself to different situations and circumstances, push your emotional boundaries. By exposing ourselves to different situations and circumstances, new synaptic connections are fired in the brain. Kaboom. One last thing I'm going to share from this book is quit picking fights and go make something. You're going to see a lot of stupid stuff out there, and you're going to feel like you need to correct it. One time I was up late on my laptop and my wife yelled at me, "Quit picking fights on Twitter and go make something." I would call this my review of the book. This wouldn't be considered a review, would it be? Let me know in the comment section below what you liked, what you didn't like. And I highly recommend getting a copy of this book. I'm going to give away one copy of this book. All you have to do is hit that like button, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter. And I will randomly select one person to send this book to. This is my copy. I have another one over there somewhere, and I will send it to you. Leave a comment below and tell me why I should send you this book. And that's it. Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, hello, welcome. I'll see you tomorrow.